Right. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. If I could kindly ask you to be seated and take your place. Right. Well, hello. Thank you for being here with us today and for taking your time to be here. Today's press conference is on the situation of stray dogs in Romania, and this is in relation to the recently adopted stray dog euthanasia law by the Parliament of Romania. Unfortunately, one of our co-hosts of this conference is running a bit late, but hopefully he will join us pretty soon. MEP WOJCIECHOWSKI, who's the AGRI Vice-Chairman, as well as the Vice-Chairman of the Animal Welfare Intergroup, has been on 2 visits to Romania, and he would like to present his case today. Panie pośle, jeżeli można prosić.
Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for coming. Okay, there is Polish translation. Please allow me to use the Polish translation. Will be maybe better for me to express precisely my point of view. And proszę Państwa,
ladies and gentlemen, we MEPs have been receiving a lot of letters from mainly Romanian citizens, but not only. And they are very concerned indeed with the situation of stray dogs in their country, since a new law was passed in Romania last year on the euthanization of stray dogs. The law provides for the catching and euthanization of stray dogs. And there's a lot of strays in Romania. So the letters highlighted this very worrying situation and the inhumane and bad treatment that these dogs were given, and including the way that they were killed. The letters that we're receiving suggest that this is happening on the streets, in front of people, in front of children. And people are very concerned about this. They're writing to us. They've been sending us photos of these scenes, and it's all very worrying. We wanted to check the facts for ourselves, so we went to Romania twice, once in December. That was a joint visit with Mr. ZANONI, who was supposed to be here and may join us in a moment. And during that first visit, we met with representatives of the Romanian authorities. We met with the directorship of the veterinary authority, the Mayor of Bucharest, and we met some representatives of Animal Welfare NGOs, as well as people we just met over the course of our visit and who we spoke to on the streets whilst we were touring Bucharest. Now, the authorities told us that the situation was under control and that the legislation put in place after the tragic incident last year that a young child was bitten by a stray dog, and we were assured that this would all be done in a very humane fashion, and the authorities assured us that they wanted to act in line with European standards. However, once the bill came into force, we continued receiving letters telling us that the situation was extremely bad. So I and a group of staff went on a second visit to Romania in January, and we visited a number of dog shelters in Bucharest and other parts of the country. Representatives of a welfare NGO joined us. We wanted to really see the situation on the ground without necessarily highlighting who we were and where we'd come from. So these weren't just showcase shelters that we were shown. Some of these Shelters are closed off. They're in areas that the public would never come across or don't have the right to enter. And although they're run on government money, they're treated pretty much as private property, and it's basically impossible to adopt any of the animals in these shelters. It's impossible to meet the requirements or find anyone who can tell you what the requirements are. Welcome to Mr. ZANONI. I'm pleased to see he has made it. Anyone who wants to take a dog out of a shelter and adopt it has to go through an awful lot of red tape, unrealistic requirements, declare what their income is, that they have a property to keep the animal on, and if they don't own their property, then the owner of the property they live in has to give them permission to keep a dog on the premises. There are an awful lot of requirements that make it very difficult for anybody to adopt a dog. And what we saw on the ground in the shelters confirmed what we've been told, that these animals are sometimes kept without any food, even without any water. And unfortunately we did see dogs who'd been treated in this way. We've got photographic energy and photographic evidence and film evidence of this. I'm not going to shock you with those pictures here and now, but this sort of thing is going on, unfortunately. All of this is going on without appropriate government monitoring. I mean, I'm not trying to suggest that there's any intentional malice on the part of the authorities. However, the correct monitoring is not happening. All this is terribly expensive, of course. Putting down stray dogs, it costs a lot of money in Romania. Catching these dogs and putting them down cost around 100, even 200 euro in some cities. This is what we were told by representatives we talked to. A campaign of neutering or sterilisation would of course be much cheaper, I think. That would reduce costs and animal numbers. You could get a lot more for a lot less by doing it that way. So what's going on at the moment is not only inhumane, it's ineffective. This has really become a business for private companies who receive public monies in order to catch and put down these animals or run the shelters, although shelter is hardly the right word given what's going on in them. So this costs a lot of money and it's a lot of profit for the companies involved, and so it's not in their interests to solve the problem. They want the problem, the issue, to continue for as long as possible so they can earn as much money as possible out of it. So they're quite happy to see the animals multiply in number, catch them, meet their targets and earn money on it. We saw plenty of young animals while we were out there, and so clearly the bill, the new piece of legislation hasn't solved the problem, it's exacerbating it. And I share the fears expressed by animal welfare organisations in Romania. That the regulations that are going to come into force in a year, forcing owners to neuter their dogs, is not going to be practicable if they have to pay for the neutering themselves, particularly for the poorer dog owners in the countryside. Sometimes on small farm holdings, for example, you'll see a dog, and these people won't be able to pay for their animal to be neutered, so they'll have to basically leave the dog out in the wild, and then there won't be thousands of strays, there'll be millions. So I don't think that this is a solution to the problem. Really, the only way to do this is to take a rational approach to reducing animal numbers, for example, through neutering, adoption, and where animals are ill or particularly aggressive, then some sort of humane euthanasia. We didn't see any particular examples of this, but we have heard that many dogs have been killed in front of children, and for more sensitive people and sensitive children this is quite intolerable. That sort of cruelty is really immoral, and it really touches people's sensitivities. So this is a very serious problem in Romania. What can we do? Well, the only thing we can do really is to make a plea to the Romanian government and the Prime Minister. And I've today sent a letter to Prime Minister Victor Ponta via their representation to the EU. Unfortunately, I can't make that available to you today because the Prime Minister hasn't yet received it, and that wouldn't be quite right to show it to you before he's seen it himself. But I can give you a brief outline of what's in the letter. We outline what we saw when we were in Romania. We say that it doesn't tally with what the authorities have told us, and that we have grounds to believe that the complaints that we receive in letters to the European Parliament are well founded, and that perhaps the government should reconsider this system, because this isn't a solution to the problem. Romania is spending money, a lot of money, but there are going to be more and more of these stray dogs. There's going to be a lot of cruelty whilst people look on without actually solving the problem, and at the same time Romania's image is going to suffer, and that's a real shame because they've only recently become members of the EU, something we're very happy about. With Mr. ZANONI, during the first visit to Bucharest, we saw a lot of people helping these stray dogs. So they're stray if you like, but there are individuals who feed them, help them, and these dogs are peaceable and calm. And there's a lot of people in Romania who help dogs out in this way. And what's going on now is really traumatizing these people. So let me also say that in our letter to the Prime Minister, we paraphrase Mahatma Gandhi and say that we recognize a civilization's stage of development by the way it treats its animals. We're trying to create an attitude to animals that reflects our stage of development in the 21st century, but unfortunately, and putting things diplomatically, the situation in Romania isn't quite up to that level. We've seen problems in Bosnia-Herzegovina, in Ukraine, where stray dogs were brutally culled. In the EU, we don't necessarily have an influence outside of the EU, but here this is going on in an EU country, and I think that this is something that's upsetting for the whole of the European Union. We're getting letters, as I say, from around the EU, and it's undermining Romania's positive image. A lot of people will undoubtedly say, should we really go on holiday to Romania and risk seeing horrible things like this happening? So I think that the authorities in Romania really need to give this serious thought. We're not trying to give lessons here. The European Union doesn't have any competence in the area of dealing with stray animals. But I will say that yesterday the Parliament adopted the Paulsen report on animal welfare. That's a legislative proposal suggesting that stray animals should be registered across the whole of Europe between now and 2018. So the national member states would have to do it by 2018 and EU across the EU by 2019. And that would include stray animals. So I think that's a very significant step, suggesting that Europe is starting to see this as a European issue. I think it's a shame that we can't offer any financial help to the Romanian authorities to deal with this issue. I think that's perhaps something we could look at in the future, using European funds for the humane treatment of stray animals. So neutering, adoption, if absolutely necessary, humane euthanasia, and shelters that are up to the required standards. I don't think that's the case in Romania at the moment, but I think that we need to look at making that possible in the future. So today I launch a heartfelt appeal to the Romanian authorities to try and resolve this matter some other way, so that they solve this problem in line with the standards that are becoming of Europe in the 21st century. These are animals, these are sentient beings. We've signed up to recognising that fact in the Amsterdam and Maastricht treaties. We can't treat them with cruelty, and of course dogs are particularly close links to human beings. So I do hope that Victor Pontan doesn't see this letter as an attack on the Romanian authorities, but rather our drawing his attention to the fact that there's a serious problem that should be resolved in a humane way. I think that's in the interests of all people, all those who demonstrate goodwill on this issue.
He's a member of parliament from Italy, and he's the vice chair of the Animal Welfare Intergroup of the European Parliament. Mr. Zanoni, the floor is yours.
Buon pomeriggio a tutti.
Good afternoon, everybody. I fully agree with the statement made by our colleague, Mr. WOJCIECHOWSKI. I was with him in Bucharest to see this for myself and to understand the way in which these stray dogs are managed. Now, the previous year, I had been to Sanovada to see a model refuge run by an Italian organisation, Save the Dogs, which had been opened there with the approval of the mayor and the municipality. And of course that was very well received, this humane way of dealing with stray dogs. So this was a dog shelter set up in this municipality. Adoption plays an important part here, as does microchipping and neutering of the dogs. Now, I come from a European Union country which has some of the best standards when it comes to managing stray dogs, because our legislation bans extermination of the dogs. So it's not even possible to euthanize the dogs. There's a ban on euthanizing them. However, initially in certain areas of the country, in the south, although we have this legislation, which is all very fine and good, it's not applied. So we see some very negative situations with regard to pounds for dogs, overflowing with dogs, the legislation isn't applied because keeping dogs involves using public resources, and so therefore people can make a profit out of these animals. Now, why am I talking about the case of Italy? Because in the case of Romania, we have legislation which unfortunately does make provision for euthanasia, but in the articles also makes provision for humane systems of dealing with this problem of strays. But the trouble is the same as in Italy. It's the implementation. So what happens between the legislation and what happens in actual fact? And here I agree with Mr. WOJCIECHOWSKI when he says that there's a lack of monitoring. So we can't say that a member state has appropriate legislation if the member state doesn't make provision for implementation of this legislation. Now, the Italian animal rights people and the animal rights associations are used to this very positive legislation that we have in Italy, and therefore they're very shocked and distressed by what's going on in Romania, because we all know that we have electronic means of communication these days, email, so news travels immediately. Recently, I've had a whole new wave of emails about one specific case. This are accompanied by pictures. We're not showing you the pictures, but they relate to a pound in Craiova, an animal shelter. And here you have some of the pictures. The thing that really upset people was the extermination of some dogs inside the cages by violent means. So you can see the pools of blood, which clearly come from extermination of strays, but not in line with legislation. Now, Romanian legislation doesn't permit this type of thing to happen, but the fact that you don't have appropriate monitoring means that in these dog pounds, these dog shelters, such things can happen. Now, I'm not saying that they don't happen elsewhere in Europe too. I would never say that, but because of monitoring, people are more likely to implement the legislation because the controls do exist. Now, these are the pictures coming in from Romania, and I think it's in the interest of the government of Romania to ensure that pictures, images such as this are not leaving their country, these violent images, because, of course, an emerging country, it's a beautiful country. It has some very beautiful places. It could benefit a great deal from tourism, and it's a great pity if these images are going out to spoil the image. So I think the government needs to be more attentive to ensuring that the legislation is properly implemented. Now, what do the Romanian associations say? One of the complaints I hear is that the animal shelters or pounds are closed. It's very difficult to gain access to them. If somebody does get access to them, they sometimes come out with pictures or information about them. And so I think that the government, the state, could benefit from a transparency relating to these dog shelters so that people are seeing things. People from outside are seeing what's going on. I think if there was more transparency, there'd be a higher level of compliance with legislation. And so all these initiatives referred to by Mr. WOJCIECHOWSKI, that initiatives that the intergroup have taken, are all intended to do something to remedy this situation, which is clearly extremely unfortunate.
Perhaps we could have a few questions. If you're interested in asking a question, if I could just ask you to direct specify to who the question is directed. And if you could tell us your name and the newspaper you are from. Dear Madam, if you could be so kind.
Anna Vandensky from the EU Reporter. I have a question to Mr. WOJCIECHOWSKI because you said about the letter you wrote and you outlined it. But the point is, does the Minister realize to what extent he faces the political consequences of this cruelty, because we have an overwhelming feedback from our readers that they pose question how come that this kind of country is in the EU, and they blame that enlargement wasn't well prepared. So does he know about the political consequences for the whole policy of enlargement is the first question. And the second question is, do you think that it's possible to apply Lisbon Treaty à la carte, because there is such a serious policy as welfare of the animals, and Romanian authorities, they really shoot not only the dogs in the street, but they shoot European values?
Dziękuję bardzo.
Thank you. Well, we very firmly say that what's happening is ruining Romania's image. So I think the Prime Minister will be aware of just how bad this is for Romania's image. Perhaps that hasn't been the case so far. Yes, we have animal welfare included in the treaties as part of our European values. I've often been a proponent of animal welfare being applied to all animals in the EU, to all species, regardless of whether they're farmed or whatever. There's a trend of limiting animal welfare to farm animals. Yesterday, we also, when we adopted the animal welfare report, we did mention strays, and we did suggest that animal welfare for stray animals and pet animals was also part of this issue, and was covered by European legislation. So I think we've taken a big step in that direction.
Thank you for your presence. Unfortunately, we're going to have to end this press conference because there's one next in line, but please feel free to ask any questions in a more informal manner just outside the press room. Thank you.
Z Rumunii? Aha.
Wszystkie pytania teraz na zewnątrz, bo teraz już jest czas, 5 minut już po czasie, jest następna konferencja, ale na zewnątrz wszyscy będą nieformalnie pytania. Znaczy bardziej w sposób nieformalny.
No dobrze.
Thank you, Andrea.
Thank you. I'm sorry, but the last if I can't go with you. If I can't help you in this issue, I am present.
Thank you for your help, and always I will answer. Join you. Okay. To work together. Pleasure.